Okay, so I have had a lot of fun with the car setup the way it is so far. We've done a lot of things to improve the reliability and the mechanical function of it and the drivetrain. I have successfully driven this car to some kind of high pressure rides, sitting in a parade line in the middle of summer to go through some graduations, some extended hour trips with my wife, hoping not to have a breakdown. And we've been pretty lucky so far. If you've been following along, we've replaced quite a few parts and done a fair amount of work. A new thing has kind of cropped up that I think is just innate to the car, and that is probably because I drive it on the interstate now, getting the speed up 60, 65. It'll do 70 and above. It's not a slow car. But I've come to the conclusion that this car does enjoy eating points. It's running well. I've only had to do maybe 2-3 adjustments to the points. One after was a brand new points install, which that's just a given. You're not going to put a brand new set of points in there and not have to adjust your gap and get your right dwell. But my belief is that the points on the distributor cam are just happily gnawing away at that bumper, and I'm seeing a kind of consistent closing up of that point gap. And this is a physical, it's not, I don't see blackened points. We're not burning them. We're not scorching them. This is just normal wear for it. And I think that would be considered normal for the car, that you're just not going to have extended high-speed interstate driving without having more frequent points adjustments. I know I can adjust the points, and I've kept the car true to a 6-volt system, point-driven, carbureted. I am going to switch this car over to a solid-state ignition set, so that I don't have to do any points adjustment. And once the timing gets set, that will be the end of it for the most part. The problem is that this, I don't know if it's considered a problem or not, but it's been an annoyance of mine now. It just eats at me that this car was indeed, when it was factory new, a negative ground system. It was flipped over to positive at some point in time. Most of the solid-state ignition sets that you get and other devices and upgrades you're ever going to do on a car are modern electronics, and that they require a negative ground system. So to pave the way for maybe a few other slight improvements on this car, I need to get it back to its original factory condition, which was a negative ground. That will make my ammeter start acting correctly, because when they flipped it over, they did not reverse the wires on the ammeter on the car, which is why as it's charging, it goes the wrong direction towards discharge. Doubt that it's going to improve the radio. I don't know the wiring of the radio from back in the day. It may not be polarity specific, but certainly any modern radio or upgraded radio that you put into the car is going to have to be a negative ground type system. And the solid state ignition system that I will be getting, definitely, I purposely bought a negative ground system. I do believe you can buy a positive, certainly, because many cars were from the factory positive ground, and many people want to keep that. But I can already tell that the direction that I'm going, at least for the short term, for a few other upgrades, is I want to have a negative ground system, and I want to get this car back to the factory correct negative earth, negative ground system. So that's what I'm going to be doing today, is I will be reversing the polarity back to a negative ground system, which will require flipping the battery around and taking the cables with it, because I like having the cables reflect the polarity of the battery. Repolarizing the generator and the regulator to match the new polarity of the battery, And I will have to remember not to forget to flip my ignition coil as well to the traditional negative ground, negative coil going to the, or negative contact on the coil going to the distributor, as most cars are now today. So the part that I'm dreading the most is actually disconnecting the battery and flipping that beast around. It's going to be a big lean over into the trunk of this car, and it weighs a ton, I'm sure. But it needs to get done, and I'll try to document these steps on here. And if you've been on the internet looking about reversing polarity, there is so much garbage that is out there on the internet, and misinformation on what to expect or how difficult it will be. But no, the car is not going to run backwards. It will still, I don't have to change any wiring on the starter. That's misinformation that's out there. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but let's just go ahead and do it, and then we'll see how it is when I'm done. Okay, so I've removed the battery tie down, and I have flipped the battery around. It wasn't as quite as heavy as what I was afraid it would be, which is a blessing. So now we have positive over there, negative over here, and I'm just going to do nothing more than swap these cables out here, this one and that taped up negative cable strap over there, flip those cables around. Originally it would have been actually a black cable, similar to this one on the car. That negative strap over there is just a common grounding strap that you can pick up at any farming store. I may replace that out one day. They taped over it considerably just to try to keep things from shorting out to it. That's a little dubious, but it does ground, it does work, so I'll just go ahead and keep it for right now, but that'll be getting swapped out eventually here. Alright, just a quick update. Nothing terribly exciting other than that I've reconnected, the battery's been flipped. I've reconnected my quick disconnect over here. I have flipped around the ignition coil to a negative post going to the distributor, which is correct for a negative ground system. I will be next hooking up the negative cable to the battery, just to make sure that everything's working okay. And I gotta remember to put my battery tie down on too. Don't forget that, Del. And then we will polarize the system, or repolarize the system, over at the voltage regulator there, communicating to the field coils in the regulator and to the generator that we now have reversed polarity, and we have a different polarity. Alright, so now I've got things wired back up. I've got my battery cinched back down. Got my battery minder tender hooked back up here. Can't see it off camera here, but I'm playing around with that just to make sure that it's covered and insulated and not a problem. I went ahead and moved my quick disconnect to the negative terminal of the battery, which is much more proper than what it was before, where it was on the positive. I have flipped around the coil wires. I spun the whole coil and reconnected the wires there so that the negative is going to the distributor. I kind of like the way that the wires, for the most part, are a little more out of the way. So anyway, I'll play around with that for a little bit here. Not quite satisfied with everything here, but nonetheless, now it's time to go to the, I got to drop the hood, flip it over to the other side, and we have to go polarize the regulator and the generator. So right there, I polarized those bottom two lugs, jumped across them there with a jumper wire to get the voltage regulator and the generator on the same wavelength as the battery. And now I'll just go ahead and try to see if it works and get it started. Let's see here. That is ignition. One Porsche. Here, come on, darling. Ooh, we're close. Well, we are running. Not running backwards, not doing anything strange. I know there's a lot of interesting theories out there, but that is supposed to be just about the end of it. Not that complicated of a thing. Let me look and see if my ammeter is now behaving better. And we can't really see because we're not charging. I could let's slip inside here and give it a little gas and see if we get some charge showing up. That's better. That's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. Okay. Don't think that there's anything else that will come about from it. I'll go ahead and turn on the radio here just in case it was going to magically pop to life, but I don't think it is. Too bad. That'd be fun. Doubt that the clock was going to just start magically coming to life. That'd be fun if it did that. I'd have no idea about the clock and the polarity of it and if it matters at all. And I doubt very much that the turn signals are going to start working. I was hoping that might be something that just happened, but nope. So I probably still have some work to do on the inside of the steering column with that. But we are a positive, well, I should say positive. We are now a negative ground system. Car is still running, and everything else should be working just like it normally would. There's lights on. Boy, you can just barely see. It probably isn't going to show up on here at all. The turn signals are so weak on these cars. But anyway, yeah. There we go. Not too much excitement. Boy, you can really see the ammeter drop down when you turn on those lights. There we go. All right, that's enough playing around with the gas pedal. I think we've solved that. So I think we've paved the way now for moving on to solid state ignition, maybe even. So we have a little bit of gas leak happening at the old tank. It looks like it's actually happening where the filler neck connects to the tank. The tank that's on there is original. It's been repaired at least once. I'm not sure what exactly the repair work was done. It may have been lined. It may have had something else to do with it. The tank has been crushed a little bit previously and is leaking again. So I went ahead, and because you can, they do sell tanks that are pretty readily available now for a Roadmaster like this. Came in the mail. Comes in two parts. There's the filler neck and the offset for this tank, which you measure from the front to the back, was 13 inches. So that's the size offset. That's the one measurement you kind of have to know when you go to place your order. But happy to have a new gas tank, and I'll just have to see if I actually have some rubber left over from all my other car endeavors there to see if I can't clamp that up right there and get that installed. But hopefully it won't be too big of an ordeal. It is nice that the car, the old tank, has a drain plug on it, so getting the gas isn't quite as much of a struggle as what I've had to deal with other vehicles that don't have a drain plug on the gas tank. So anyway, let's get a new gas tank put on the car and get rid of that gas smell that was happening whenever I would ever do a complete fill up. You know, nearly up to the top of the neck. It was just too much pressure on the tank. Made the gas creep out a little bit at the weak seals. And now we're under the car with jack stands, and I'm looking at the tank here. And there you go, that's your plug. So go ahead and drain the tank, and we will go up top after that and disconnect the fuel line. The lighting in here is not very good for it, but you get it. There's a fuel line going to it and a very simple screw connection right there, so not too challenging. Alright, tank is drained, and I don't know if it's showing up very good for you there, but the fuel line right there is now disconnected, so we can go ahead and drop the tank. Alright, the tank is down. Here's your gas gauge cable right there, and I'm just going to go right around here while it's on the ground and take this entire sending unit out right here and bring the new tank over, and we'll get it put right back up. Bonus. I should look harder through my packaging. Came with my tank a whole new sending unit gasket and screws, better screws than what I had, and the filler neck coupling. Only thing is I don't have clamps that fit it, so have to go to the store and get some more clamps. I'm always using up these clamps right and left, it seems like, in my life. Not sure if I'll regret this or not. There is a little bit of internal venting to this neck. There's see the tack welds right there. There's a bar that creates a space so that when you're putting it in there, there's an air gap, and perhaps, you know, air can kind of come back up while you're filling it up. Compare that to the old tank, which did it the old-fashioned way of just having a separate line stabbing into the tank. You can see it was actually right around here, around the filler neck, that I was having some weeping of some gas. Maybe a little bit up here about that area of that little clamp guy there. There's a depression and a divot right there where your sending unit electrical line could go underneath there and you could push it down. So anyway, yeah, that's old tank, and we'll never know exactly how, when, or whatever it got smashed in right there and smashed in right there, backing over something. It did get in some type of an accident at some point in time and had to be pulled out of somewhere. So anyway, there's old sending unit hanging down there. Can't go any further though until I have clamps to make this neck up to the tank. So let's come back later when I have the right size clamps. Alright, we've been to the store and we've got the clamps we need, and I did notice they put a little bit of a nice little dent inside of here. That's intentional, because with this cap screwed on there, with a little bit of gasket material around there, if that was completely flat, you would have a completely sealed tank. So they have a little notch in there. I actually took a chisel and just dented it in a little bit more so that you can actually put the cap on, and you'll be able, when the fuel pump's pumping, it will have enough of a vent there that it can actually pump gas. And for this install, I'm actually going to gasket, use this fuel resistant gasket dressing and sealant. Put it on here, put it on the tank, get that lined up correct, and actually get that tacked together and kind of cured and sitting there first. And then I will, once that's in place, put the sending unit through there and put a little bit more gasket material on top, and then tighten that all together. Okay, so we've got the gas tank installed. The filler neck there, I don't know, it might be just a little bit shorter than the previous one that I had, but it should be fine still for being able to fill up. So that's that. And underneath here, you can see we've got the tank installed, and it's great to have something clean and on there and good. And I guess the only advice I could give you is, if you were going to do your own tank again, it's actually easier to put that rubber boot and get it snugged up in there against the tank while it's down on the ground. It wasn't that hard to get it in there to tighten that clamp, but it would have been easier if it was here. And I don't know if you remember from the previous video, but I put that Let's see if we can get up to it here. Right there's my little tattle screw there that I put in to see if I had a bunch of fluid coming out, either differential fluid or transmission fluid, and I just took it out a moment ago and it was pretty much dry. So that's great. And while I was underneath here, I hated the arrangement that I had for my vented screw. I don't know if you can see it. The lighting isn't very good here, sorry, but right there what that is I did an improved little vent on one of these bolts here. I just improvised and drilled it out. I'd gone through and made it hollow, remember, and now it's a vented differential, and that seems to be a tidier arrangement. My previous piece had broken off there, and I had a little bit of drizzle coming down the top, and while I was at it, I did go ahead and make sure that we were full up all the way to the bottom there of the check hole. So nothing left to do now, really, but other than fill it back up with gas. Now that we have the tank replaced, we're going to move on to putting in a solid state ignition. So here's the classic Pertronix solid state ignition, and it's built for 6 volt and for negative ground, hence the reason why I needed to get this car converted over to negative ground. So anyway, I've already confirmed, I'm sure I thought it was anyway, but you do have to have a primary resistance or primary coil resistance of at least 0.6 ohms, and we have more than that on this coil. It is a points style coil for sure. So that means we can move on with the next parts here, like getting the distributor cap and rotor off and checking everything out there, and then getting into doing the installation. Alright, we have distributor cap off. We'll take the rotor off of there, and you have to know which way you're going to install a plate later here, and you need to know which way your distributor, your rotor rotates, and on this car it's counterclockwise. I know you've seen this in the previous videos, but anyway, here's your negative coil wire, now negative, ever since I flipped the polarity, that went to the distributor right there. That little bolt stuck through the distributor, and there's a grommet on the other side there, and then a nut holding all that together, and that's where the points were connected to. I've got that out of the car now. I did disconnect the battery before I did any of this as well. I like working with the battery disconnected on anything electrical. And now we'll move on with a little more disassembly of getting the points out of there. So with the little screw that held on the condenser right there, and then the larger screw that holds on the points itself, and the points wire disconnected, the entire assembly just comes out like that. I should have said I also did remove the little offset screw there, the one that's got a little bitty lug on the back side of it there for doing some fine adjustment of the points back and forward. So I'm keeping everything here in case I ever need to reinstall points on the system for whatever, if my electronic ignition system fails, which they generally don't, but doesn't necessarily hurt to have a spare set of points handy. And here with the instructions, you can see right down here it tells you what it looks like if you're a counterclockwise rotation, which we are. And we have our picture of that breaker plate. Here's the breaker plate that comes with it. This entire assembly is a breaker plate. They give you a new screw to put in right there just to kind of get it settled back in. You could probably reuse your old screw, but I'm going to keep that with the point set that I have. Tighten that up, and we will move on to the next part of the installation. So we're getting ready to put on the magnet and spacer ring, and they have a couple of diagrams here pointing out to you that you can have a couple of different versions of your cam. See how this version here has a little step or up step on it right there, and this one is cut flat. Depending on whether you have this type of cam lobe or this cam lobe, you have this spacer ring right here either flipped with a little bit of a step up or down. Flip the opposite way, down. So on the Buick here, as you can see, it's completely flat right there. There is no, hold on. There's no step up above and beyond the cam. At least that's where I'm interpreting it. So I will follow the instructions here for here, where there is no step up. I'm going to use this side here, and the spacer will go with the additional spacer pointing downward. So I've got the new igniter part there. There's 2 wires to it here. The new solid state ignition part is right there. 2 wires coming off of it. It comes with a grommet right there. I'm not going to seat that grommet yet because we have more parts to install. And as you'll see here in a moment, there's a part that fits over this cam, and there's a special instruction on how to put a spacer as well. So I'll just kind of stop with the wires threaded through. I haven't connected anything yet, and we'll get to putting on those other cam components there. So this magnet ring goes on first, and it's cut. It'll only go on one way. You can't put it on upside down accidentally. And there does not appear to be any orientation to it whatsoever for number 1 through 8 cylinder or anything. It just basically goes on, and they do say you have to push it down firmly and it'll install with a snap. So let's see if we can get it on here. That feels like it's lined up. Yeah. That definitely went on with a little bit of a 1-2 crunch, and I can see that it's pretty much completely flat with the top facing here of our cam. And this spacer ring goes next on top, and I don't know if you can see it, but can you see there's just a little bit of a lip on the bottom side, and that is supposed to be installed facing down. It doesn't click on or do anything like that, it just rests on top of there. It's purely for spacing. I should probably point out there is just a wee bit, it's not much. There's maybe a little bit of lip there on the magnet around there. It's not 100% flush, but I've pushed on that several times. So it's fully seated, and now I've got the spacer on there the way that it's supposed to go as well, with the down. So now that the other parts were installed, I can use the 2 smaller screws that were provided to put the actual solid state ignition component on. I'm not done with these wires here yet. I'm going to move them around inside this grommet and kind of get these things lined up so that they're not going to touch or rub on anything. And I think they're pretty nice and slinky. There's plenty of room in here. They're not going to affect the advanced mechanism or anything else on here. But I'll take a little bit of time just to make sure that they're out of the way and not inhibiting anything. I should probably point out there's a little bit of a space right there in that grommet. That's what you have to get pulled through to have it pop into place to make sure it's snug and tight and isn't going to let any water into the distributor. So now I've got things pretty much installed and loomed up the way that I want them to be. I went ahead and left the length that was on the wires. I liked the terminals that they put on the existing wires. So I've got things snugged up, but not over snugged. I don't want to gorilla everything. Previous versions may have had a kit to put a specific space right in there. It's not going to show up very good here, but there is an air gap in between the magnet and the solid state ignition component there, but that is set by where the screws go into the breaker plate, so you don't really get an adjustment or anything like that on there. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to put the rotor back on and distributor cap and see if it'll start up. For diligence, I should probably go ahead and point out that as you can see right there, that plus, that's my positive coil side with the red wire going to the positive and the black wire going to the negative as it is supposed to be. Okay, I've got all my connections secured, made sure that the rotor was completely back on like it's supposed to be, distributor's back on, ignition coil is hooked back up completely. I had disconnected my battery, so I got that reconnected. Let's switch it on, crank it over, and see what happens. Yep. There we go. She is cold, but obviously not running too bad. Yeah, all right. So I would call that a success, and now we just need to go let it warm up, and I'm gonna wind up double checking my timing, making sure that's set and that everything is happy there, and that should be the end of the install. Okay, well, nothing is ever really 100% easy, is it? So, though the car was running, when I came back over here and looked at it, my entire distributor cap was really kind of wobbling around. It was not seated down on there well, which made me then begin to doubt a little bit, well, have I not seated my distributor correctly? Did I not seat my rotor down correctly? Did I not put the magnets of the spacer on correctly? When you get out on the forums, it's not uncommon, apparently, for the spacer and magnet and rotor combo that you get to need some adjustment on the thickness. So this cap and rotor that I got as a replacement is just comes. I don't even remember which brand it was, but anyway, I'm just going to show you real quick what the fix was. So what I wound up doing, as many people have done, is see the bottom of that there? I put a couple of marks with a sharp razor, took it over to some sandpaper on a flat surface, and rubbed it around in circles to start grinding down the height of this rotor so that it sits a little bit lower. I did nothing with the spacer. The spacer is just as the spacer was. I also have the spacer installed correctly. I'm sure that there's people who have had that flipped up and had it in the wrong direction and had problems with height issues. But the install is correct. The magnet is fully seated. You'll see on the forums a lot of people will say immediately that you didn't put your magnet down underneath there fully, but mine is. And I can tell by how nice and flush it was with the cam there. So anyway, I shaved off, I don't know, probably on this one here, about 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters. And when I installed it again, my distributor cap was no longer wobbling a little bit on top of the distributor housing there. So fair warning, everybody. You may have to do a little bit of modification to the rotor, whichever aftermarket one you have for wherever you bought it from, to kind of help it sit down a little bit lower and not push up on the distributor cap so hard. There's actually, if you look on the inside of a distributor cap, there's a generous amount of height that you have there for the rotor to strike against. So that's why you would choose to change the height of your, wherever I dropped that, where'd you go, rotor. You would choose to actually change the height, of your rotor up and down, rather than trying to grind on that spacer or anything else in there. That spacer has actually not a whole lot of plastic on it there, so there's not much adjustment you would ever be able to do on that anyway. Good old internet. Thanks to all the forums out there for people who fiddle around with these. But anyway, I've already done my shaving off. I've already put it back on there. I've run it for a while. No more distributor cap wobble going on or anything like that. And I think we're back on the path of righteousness now. Yeah, there we go. See, no wobble. I probably should have filmed it before while it was wobbling, but this entire head was just kind of, you could just see it kind of oscillating just ever so slightly the distributor cap was just kind of rolling around there like that. Very alarming when I first saw that. I said, whoa, something clearly wasn't right. Actually put it back on a couple times to make sure I knew what I was looking at here, and yeah, we're doing okay. So let's get back to tuning up.